Okay, so I want to take you back, way back, to a very specific moment in time.
All right, I'm ready.
The date is April 17th, 1862, and we are in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Okay. Worcester, 1862. I'm picturing it.
I want you to, really try to picture the scene. It's a mild spring morning. The trees are just starting to get that sort of green haze on them.
A little bit of mud on the ground still, probably.
Which is sure. It's New England in April. But there's this tension in the air that you can almost taste.
Because the country is, it's literally breaking in half.
It's breaking in half. The Civil War is raging. We're a full year into what will become the bloodiest conflict in American history. The Battle of Shiloh has just happened.
Thousands dead. Just unimaginable numbers.
And people are reading the casualty lists every single morning in the paper. It is a heavy, heavy time. But our story today, it doesn't start on a battlefield.
Yeah.
It doesn't start in a war room or a hospital tent. It starts somewhere much, much quieter.
Starts at a post office.
At a post office.
Which is just such a mundane setting, isn't it? For something that would eventually change the entire course of American literature.
It's the perfect contrast. So standing there, waiting for his mail, is a man named Thomas Wentworth Higginson.
Higginson, okay.
Now, if you were a local in Worcester in 1862, you would know this guy. You'd recognize him. He's 38 years old. He's tall. He's fit. He's actually a bit of a local authority on, of all things, physical fitness.
Right. And he's also a radical abolitionist, a writer, a man of letters. He contains multitudes, as they say.
He really does. And in fact, he's just come from the local gymnasium where he was watching these young women trained with dumbbells.
Which is a detail I just love from the book we're covering today, White Heat by Brenda Wineapple. It tells you so much about him right away. This is not your average Victorian man.
Not at all.
He's thinking about women's strength, their health, at a time when women were basically seen as, fragile ornaments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Higginson gets his mail. He's probably expecting, the usual bills, maybe news from the war front, maybe a letter from an admirer of his writing.
Sure.
But he pulls out this one envelope that just stops him in his tracks.
And it's the envelope itself that catches his eye first.
Yes. It's cream colored.
Yeah.
And the handwriting on it, it's weird.
Weird is putting it mildly. I think Higginson later described it as looking like the fossil tracks of a bird.
That's such a perfect description. It wasn't that neat, elegant, looping script, the Spencerian script that everyone was taught in school.
No, this was. It was scrawled, it was loopy, almost urgent looking. Like it was written by a child or maybe someone in a fever. It was just distinct.
So he opens it. And here's where the mystery really deepens. There's no signature on the letter itself.
None.
Just 4 poems. And tucked inside the bigger envelope is a smaller one. He opens that, and there's a little card inside with a name penciled on it.
It's such a deliberate strategy, isn't it? She's separating the art from the person, at least initially. Like, here's the work, the author is secondary.
And then he reads the opening line of that letter. And it is, I think, maybe the most famous opening line in all of American literary history.
I think you're right.
Are you too deeply occupied to say, if my verse is alive?
Chills. Just think about the sheer audacity of that question.
Right.
She doesn't ask, do you like this, or is this good, or will this sell? She asks, is this alive? She's asking this fundamental ontological question about her own creation.
And that single question, it started a correspondence that would last for 25 years. So today, we are unpacking the source text White Heat by Brenda Wineapple. And our mission here is to explore this unlikely, frankly impossible, friendship between that letter writer, Emily Dickinson, the ultimate recluse, and the recipient, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, a man who was literally out there breaking down courthouse doors.
It's a complete collision of two opposing forces. You've got the force of absolute seclusion in Dickinson.
Total isolation.
And the force of radical public intervention in Higginson. And what Wineapple argues, and what we're going to dig into, is how these two forces didn't just meet, they collided in a way that saved a poet's life and her legacy.
So let's dive in. Are you too deeply occupied to say, if my verse is alive?
What a question. It's so loaded.
It is. But, to understand why she asked him, why this specific man, we have to go back just a few weeks earlier in April of 1862.
Right. What was going on in Higginson's life that made him the target for this letter? Why him and not, the editor of some other magazine?
Well, he was a very public figure. He was writing regularly for the Atlantic Monthly.
Which was basically the cultural Bible of the time. If you were an intellectual in New England, you read the Atlantic, it was the place to be.
And earlier that very month, he had published an article called Letter to a Young Contributor.
Okay, so this was, what, like an advice column for aspiring writers, a sort of how to get published 101?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it was very practical in some ways. He was giving tips like, use good black ink, use good pens, use clean white paper.
Solid advice. I mean, nobody wants to read faint pencil on a napkin.
True.
Yeah.
But he went deeper than just, office supplies.
Yeah.
He mixed in this very didactic, almost moral life advice.
Right. He had that line.
Charge your style with life.
Mm-hmm.
He told writers that there could be years of crowded passion in a word and half a life in a sentence.
Charge your style with life.
Ah!
That's a great line. But here's the irony, and Wineapple points this out so beautifully.
He was trying to charge his own style with life.
Yes, because he was feeling completely and totally stuck.
It's a crucial point, isn't it? He's 38 years old. The country is tearing itself apart. He's this radical abolitionist who believes in action, believes in getting your hands dirty. And where is he?
He's at home. He's writing these, lovely little nature essays about flowers and birds and articles about women's gymnastics.
He felt this massive tension between his literary life and his desire for military action. He was writing letters to his mother, trying to sound important, but also sort of boasting to his editor about how overwhelmed he was.
He was projecting this confidence, but internally he felt like he was missing the big moment. He felt like a failure.
So he's telling everyone else, be alive.
Yeah.
Because he feels dead inside.
Exactly. He's coaching people on how to be passionate while he feels completely paralyzed by his own inaction in the war. And the public reaction to his article was, well, it was huge.
It totally backfired, didn't it?
Oh, it was a flood. He told his editor, James T. Fields, that he foresaw these young contributors sending him worse things than ever, and they did.
He was just getting buried in bad poetry.
Specimens of terrible verse arriving day after day, people sending him rhymes about, their dead pets or the local sunset.
So he's sitting at his desk, probably rolling his eyes, sifting through this mountain of awful poetry, thinking, why on earth did I invite this? And then, boom.
The cream-colored envelope arrives.
And it just stops him dead in his tracks.
You have to wonder what he thought when he first read the poems inside.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. One of them was safe in their alabaster chambers. Now think about it. If you're Higginson, you're used to reading Longfellow or Whittier. You're used to a nice steady rhythm. Day-day, day-doom, day-do.
The smoothness and elegance that he actually advocated for in his own article, the very thing he was telling other writers to strive for.
And then he reads this. I just want to look at that first stanza and imagine what Higginson must have heard in his head.
Okay.
Safe in their alabaster chambers, untouched by morning, and untouched by noon, lie the meek members of the resurrection rafter of satin and roof of stone.
Just listen to that rhythm, that last line. Rafter of satin and roof of stone. It just lands with this heavy thud.
It's so final, almost claustrophobic.
It is. And look at the meter. It starts out kind of regular and then it breaks. And the dashes, we can't see them on the podcast, obviously, but visually, the page is just scarred with these horizontal dashes.
It's not safe in their alabaster chambers, comma.
Yeah.
It's safe in their alabaster chambers, dash. It signals a pause, a gasp, a hesitation. It's totally different.
It's breathless. Like she's almost panting while she writes it.
Yeah. And Higginson, he later used the word spasmodic to describe her style.
He just didn't know what to do with it. He said her poetry was torn up by the roots.
That's a great image.
Imagine pulling a plant out of the ground. You get the flower, sure, but you also get the dirt and the worms and the tangled, messy root system. That's what he felt he was reading. It wasn't polished, it was raw.
He's expecting a nice, neat bouquet, and she handed him the whole clump of earth.
And the content, safe in their alabaster chambers sounds kind of religious, right? Resurrection. But Wineapple points out that it's actually a terrifying poem.
How so?
These dead people aren't in heaven communing with God. They're stuck. They're in the cold ground. They are untouched by noon. They are effectively erased from the living world. It's this incredibly skeptical modern view of death wrapped up in this jagged, unconventional package.
Wow. So he's holding this raw genius in his hands. He recognizes it's something totally new. He could have just ignored it, right? Like he probably did with dozens of other bad poems.
No, he didn't.
He wrote back immediately.
He did, which is maybe the most important thing he did in this whole exchange. He took her seriously.
And he didn't just say, thanks for the poems, nice dashes. He asked questions.
He was curious. He wanted to know who this person was. He asked her age, what books she read, what her education was like. He was trying to build a profile of this mystery woman. He was intrigued by the mind behind the jagged meter.
And her responses to him, oh man, Wineapple calls her the naive coquette.
It is the perfect description because she evaded almost every single question.
She lied about her age, didn't she?
Yeah.
Or at least was very misleading.
She was. She implied she had been writing for a much shorter time than she actually had. She told him very demurely that she had no education in his manner of the phrase.
Which is just total false modesty, right? I mean, this woman was incredibly well read.
Completely. In the same letter, she's referencing Keats, Ruskin, Sir Thomas Browne, the Book of Revelation. She knew exactly what she was doing.
She was positioning herself.
She was. And then she describes her companions, not people, but the hills, the sunset, and her dog, Carlo.
Right. And she wrote, "They are better than beings because they know but do not tell."
They know but do not tell. That gives me chills every time. It's like she's saying, I have these profound secrets and I'm only sharing them with the silent world.
And now with him.
And now maybe with him. But here's where it gets really fascinating and where you see the power dynamics start to shift. Higginson couldn't help himself. He was the expert, right? The young contributor advisor.
So he starts giving advice.
He offered what she called surgery.
Surgery. That sounds invasive.
It was. He started making editorial suggestions. He tried to, as he put it, lead her in the direction of rules and traditions. He wanted to smooth out those jagged meters, maybe get rid of some of those dashes. He basically said, you have genius, but you're wild. Let me tame you.
And how did she take that? Did she tell him to get lost?
No, she was much more subtle than that. She wrote back and said the surgery didn't hurt as much as she expected.
Oh, that's a polite jab.
It is. But, and this is the most important part, she didn't change the poems. She didn't adopt his suggestions. She thanked him, she engaged with him, but she subtly, quietly refused to alter her core style.
That is a total power move. Thank you so much for your feedback, which I will now completely ignore.
In a way, yes. She asked him to be her preceptor, her teacher, her mentor. But what Wineapple suggests is that Dickinson was actually the one in control the entire time.
She chose him.
She chose him. She initiated the correspondence. She decided which poems to send and which to hold back. She needed a listener, a safe sounding board, much more than she needed an actual editor who would change her work.
So she sort of hires him as a teacher, but really just uses him as an audience of one.
That's a great way to put it. She created this perfect private space where she could be heard and taken seriously without being corrected to the point of erasure.
Okay, so we have the spark. The letter has arrived, the game is afoot. But to really understand why Dickinson reached out to this guy, this fitness-loving abolitionist essayist, we really need to dig into who he actually was. Because he wasn't just some literary critic. He was carrying a lot of baggage.
An immense amount of baggage. You absolutely cannot understand Higginson without understanding his lineage. He was carrying the weight of the Puritans on his shoulders.
We're talking way back, right, like 1629.
We are. Francis Higginson sailed to the New World with 6 goats and his whole family. He established the very first church in Salem. He was practically the Noah of New England.
And then there's his ancestor, John.
John Higginson, the witch trial judge.
Yikes. That's a heavy, heavy legacy to carry. My great-great-grandpa hanged witches.
It's intense. He signed arrest warrants during the Salem hysteria of 1692. But, and this is interesting, he later apologized for it. He publicly repented.
Oh, he did?
He did. And this kind of establishes a theme in the Higginson family. This legacy of moral intensity, of conscience, and then of public repentance.
It's like we make enormous, historically significant mistakes, but then we feel really, really bad about them.
And we try to fix them. You can see the activist route right there. But let's jump forward a bit to Thomas Wentworth Higginson's grandfather, Stephen. He was a big-shot Federalist merchant.
The one with the cane.
The one who wielded a gold-headed cane. Opposed Thomas Jefferson. A very imposing, powerful, successful figure.
And then the dad, Stephen Higginson Jr.
The good-hearted profligate.
That is never a title you want on your tombstone.
No, it is not. He was the bursar of Harvard College. And to put it bluntly, he lost the college's money. And all of his own money.
Oh, no. Like a financial scandal.
A massive fall from grace. They had to auction off their family furniture. They had to move into a boarding house. The father died in disgrace.
So Thomas R. Higginson, he grows up in the shadow of this. He's living in what Wineapple calls shabby genteel poverty. How does that shape a kid?
It fueled this absolutely desperate desire to be great with a capital G.
Wow.
He literally wrote to his mother, "I will be great if I can." He was this tall, awkward, lonely boy who got into Harvard at age 13.
13. I don't know, barely managing pre-algebra at 13. He's at Harvard.
He was a prodigy. He just soaked up standards, as Wineapple says. He studied with Longfellow. But beneath all that academic success, there was this intense longing for restoration, for greatness. And at first, he thought that path to greatness was poetry.
He wanted to be a poet, just like Dickinson.
Desperately. He submitted his verses to The Dial, which was the big transcendentalist magazine, and he got rejected by the man himself, Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Ouch. What did Emerson say?
It was one of those polite but completely devastating critiques. He said the poems had truth, but they lacked external perfection.
Truth, but no external perfection. That is the kindest, most brutal way of saying, you've got a good heart, kid, but you just can't write.
Higginson knew it too. He admitted later he had no poetic genius. And this failure, this specific failure, is absolutely crucial to our story.
Why is that?
Because he knew what it felt like to want to be a poet and to fail. And because he couldn't be a great poet himself, he became the man who could recognize one when he saw it.
Oh, I see.
When he read Dickinson's work, he saw the genius, that external perfection in its own weird way that he lacked. He didn't see her as a competitor, he saw her as a phenomenon. If he had been some huge poetic success himself, maybe he would have been too arrogant, too dismissive to even read that scrawled letter.
That makes so much sense. His failure actually made him receptive to her genius.
Exactly. His biggest disappointment became his greatest qualification.
So he fails at poetry. He needs a new path to greatness. And this is where he pivots hard. He dives into what they were calling the newness.
The newness. It sounds like a modern marketing term, doesn't it? Like something from Silicon Valley.
It does. But it was the term for the era of transcendentalism and reform sweeping through New England.
Right. We're talking about a massive shift away from that old, gloomy Puritanism, the whole sinner in the hands of an angry God thing.
And a move towards something brighter, more optimistic.
Exactly. A rejection of human depravity, a move toward German idealism, social reform, and this powerful belief in the divinity of the individual soul. The key figures were Emerson, who was the sunny side of it all, and a guy named Theodore Parker.
Parker was known as God's fanatic, right? He was the fiery one.
Oh, he was. And you had Margaret Fuller in the mix, too. It was this atmosphere of intellectual intoxication. People were completely reimagining what it meant to be American and what it meant to be religious.
And right in the middle of all this, Higginson gets married. And his choice of wife, well, let's just say it's not exactly what his mother had in mind for him.
Mary Channing. She was older than him. She was brilliant, sharp-tongued. Wineapple calls her a conversational gymnast.
I love that phrase. It means she could talk circles around you.
She absolutely could. But she was also an invalid. She suffered from severe rheumatism and a host of other ailments, and tragically for them, they were childless.
That must have been hard.
It was. Higginson loved children. He adored them. But Mary refused to have any because her own mother had died in childbirth. She was terrified of it.
Wow. That's a heavy burden for a marriage to carry.
It was. But it also meant that Higginson's support for women's rights wasn't just some abstract theoretical idea. It was his lived reality in his own home.
Right.
He was married to a woman who was not submissive, who was his intellectual equal, or maybe even his superior, and who was trapped by her physical suffering. It made his feminism deeply personal. He saw the constraints placed on women's bodies and minds firsthand every single day.
So he takes this radical energy and he becomes a minister. He gets a church in Newburyport. Now, I know Newburyport a little bit. It's an old shipbuilding town, conservative, old money.
Very, very conservative. And Higginson arrives like a whirlwind of radicalism. He basically alienated the entire congregation almost immediately.
What did he do?
What didn't he do? He invited a former slave to speak from the pulpit. He advocated for women's rights from the pulpit. He fought for fair wages for local factory workers. And the final nail in the coffin, he preached vehemently against the Mexican War.
Which the wealthy ship-owning merchants in his congregation probably loved, right? I'm sensing a little sarcasm here.
Oh, they hated it. The war was good for business, or at least they thought so. He was forced to resign after just 2 years. He wrote, very bluntly, "My position as an abolitionist they could not bear."
So he's failed as a poet. Now he's failed as a conventional pastor. He's striking out.
But each failure just radicalized him further. He ran for Congress and lost. He felt that the political parties, even the anti-slavery Free Soil Party, were too compromising. They were willing to tolerate slavery in some places to preserve the Union, and for Higginson, that was a moral impossibility.
This brings us to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. This seems to be the real turning point, where he goes from guy who writes fiery essays to guy who is willing to pick up a gun.
The Fugitive Slave Act changed everything. It meant that slavery wasn't just a Southern problem anymore, it was now a Northern one. Slave catchers could legally come to Massachusetts, kidnap people, and drag them back into bondage.
It brought the horror right to their doorstep.
It did, and Higginson said it was a battle between human feeling and being a moral iceberg.
And he was not going to be an iceberg.
Not a chance. This all culminates in the Thomas Sims case in 1851.
Okay, tell us about this. This is the famous mattress plot, right? This needs some cinematic detail.
It does. Thomas Sims was a 17-year-old fugitive slave who was arrested in Boston. He was being held in the courthouse, which the authorities had surrounded with chains. Literally, they wrapped the courthouse in chains to keep the judges safe inside and the prisoner locked in.
Wow.
And Higginson wasn't just outside protesting with a sign. He hatched a plot. A jailbreak.
Okay, so what was the plan?
It was desperate. It was a long shot. The plan was to have Sims jump from a third-story window of the courthouse onto a pile of mattresses that Higginson and his co-conspirators would place below in the courtyard.
No way.
And then, under the cover of darkness, they'd whisk him away in a carriage to a ship that was waiting to take him to safety in Canada.
That is straight out of a movie script.
Yeah.
Did it work?
No. The plan leaked. The authorities found out, and they installed iron bars on the windows.
Ugh.
But Higginson didn't stop there. He and a small group of other abolitionists actually stormed the courthouse doors with a battering ram. There was a huge melee. A guard was killed. Higginson was cut on the chin by a saber. He carried that scar for the rest of his life.
He physically fought the police to try and free this man.
He did. But they were beaten back. The mob was dispersed. And Thomas Sims was sent back to Savannah, where he was publicly whipped.
That's just heartbreaking.
Higginson was crushed. He felt he had failed another human being. But, and this is the key takeaway for our story, it proved that Higginson was willing to use violence. He was willing to break the law for his conscience. He had what he called a crack in him.
A crack? What did he mean by that?
He said, without a little crack somewhere, a man could hardly do his duty to the times. He meant you had to have a break in the smooth armor of convention, a willingness to be called a fanatic, to do the thing that polite society says you shouldn't do.
That is fascinating. So when Emily Dickinson writes to him in 1862, she's not writing to some stuffy armchair editor. She's writing to a failed poet, a failed minister, a man who plotted a jailbreak and has a saber scar on his chin.
Exactly. And I think somehow she sensed that intensity, that crack in his writing, even if she didn't know all the details of the fight.
Okay, so let's bring them together then. Part 4, the intersection. We have the ultimate recluse and the ultimate activist. Why them? Why on earth did this friendship work?
I mean, on the surface, it makes absolutely no sense. Dickinson is the person who famously selects her own society and then shuts the door. She doesn't cross her father's ground. She wears white and stays in her room.
And Higginson is the opposite. He craves what he calls unbounded action. He lives in the public eye. He wants to be on the front lines.
But they found this incredible common ground.
Well, what's that?
I think they were both living in a time when the old religious certainties were crumbling around them. The old answers weren't working anymore. So they were both, in their own ways, looking for what Wineapple calls secular salvation.
Explain that.
For her, salvation was through poetry, finding the divine, the eternal, in the perfect word. For him, salvation was through activism, finding the divine in the pursuit of justice for others.
And they were both dealing with isolation, in a way.
Yes, the fantasy of isolation for her and the fantasy of intervention for him. But on a more practical level, I think she chose him because he was a safe radical.
Define safe radical. That sounds like a contradiction.
It does. But he was a gentleman. He was from the white, learned Harvard class. He had the pedigree. He wasn't some fringe lunatic. But he also respected women's minds. He had written that famous essay, Ought Women to Learn the Alphabet, which argued passionately for women's education.
So Dickinson knew he wouldn't just dismiss her out of hand because she was a woman.
Exactly. She knew he would take her intellect seriously, and most importantly, he listened.
He wrote back.
He wrote back. He didn't just dismiss her as spasmodic, even though he used that exact word to describe her style to his friends. To her, he was engaged. He was curious. He kept writing back for 25 years.
But let's go back to his advice. This is the thing I can't get over. He told her to delay publishing.
This is the great paradox of their relationship. The radical activist tells the revolutionary poet to wait in the wings.
Why? Why would he do that? Was he jealous? Was he just blind to how groundbreaking she was?
I don't think there was either of those. I think he was being protective.
Protect.
Yes. Remember his own experience with his letter to a young contributor. He knew the literary market. He knew that the public mocked things they didn't understand. He absolutely recognized her genius, but he feared the public ridicule she would face. He didn't want her to be crushed like he had been crushed by Emerson or like all those other young writers he saw get torn apart.
So he was trying to shield her from the critics.
I think so. He was a radical activist, but aesthetically, when it came to poetry, he was still quite conservative. He recognized her genius, but he feared her experimental form because he knew the market wouldn't get it. He thought, they will eat her alive.
And how did she react to that specific advice? To delay?
Well, she played along. She wrote that famous line that polishing was as foreign to my thought as firmament to fin.
Foreign as firmament to fin, the sky to a fish. Wow. She had a way with words.
But did she stop writing to him? No, she kept sending him poems. If she truly didn't care about being read at all, she wouldn't have maintained this intense correspondence for a quarter of a century.
So she was using him as a sounding board, not as a gatekeeper to the publishing world.
Precisely. She didn't need him to open the door to the Atlantic Monthly. She needed him to be a witness. She needed one smart, sympathetic person to understand the work, to know that it existed.
It's like she wanted to be heard, but not necessarily by the masses, just by someone who understood that there was a crack in the world.
Exactly. She wanted a witness, with a capital W.
Now, this is the part of the story that's so tough. We have to talk about what we lost, part 5. Because we have her letters to him. He saved them.
Yeah.
But we don't have his letters to her.
It's the tragedy of the archive. When Emily Dickinson died in 1886, her sister Lavinia was her executor, and Emily had left one simple instruction for her sister: burn her correspondence.
And Lavinia, being the dutiful sister, she did it.
She was thorough. She built a fire and she burned the letter. She burned Higginson's letters to Emily, all of them.
But, and here is the great, beautiful irony of it all, she accidentally saved the poems.
She did. She found the little box, the fascicles, filled with hundreds of poems later, after the letters were already ash. She had no idea they were there.
So we have the poems, and we have Emily's side of the conversation because Higginson saved her letters. But we have to infer his side.
We have to read between the lines of her letters. We have to look at how she responds to him to guess what he must have said. We can see his awe, his confusion, his deep affection, all reflected back in her answers to him. It's like seeing a conversation with one person on mute.
And after she died, Higginson finally took on the public role she had asked of him privately, right?
Yeah.
He became her preceptor for the world.
He did. He co-edited the first volume of her poems, which came out in 1890, with Mabel Loomis Todd.
Mabel Loomis Todd, that's a whole other deep dive right there with the affair with Austin Dickinson, but we will leave that for another day.
A very wise choice. But yes, Higginson wrote the preface to that first volume, and in that preface, he compared her to William Blake.
William Blake, that's not a casual comparison. That is high praise.
It is. Blake was a visionary, a mystic, a complete rule breaker. By making that comparison right up front, Higginson was helping to prepare the public for her strange, powerful genius.
Now, he did smooth out some of the rough edges, didn't he? He regularized some of her punctuation, changed a few words. Modern scholars hate him for that.
They do, but the question is, without him, would the poems have been published at all?
Probably not.
Or at least not with the same stamp of authority. He lent his considerable reputation to her unknown work. He made it safe for people to take her seriously.
And she told him near the end of her life that he had saved her life.
She did, and he in turn felt she was a wholly new and original genius. It really was a mutual rescue in the end.
So let's try to wrap this up, synthesize this deep dive. What we have is a failed poet who becomes a radical activist, who then becomes the sole confidant of America's greatest hidden genius.
It's the ultimate story of the dreamer and the worker. Higginson actually wrote about this concept in his journal. He said the dreamer should be a worker and the worker a dreamer. He struggled his whole life to reconcile those two sides of himself.
And in Dickinson, he found the ultimate dreamer who was also, in her own way, an obsessive worker. She didn't build bridges or lead troops, but she worked on words. She worked on the soul.
Exactly. Dickinson and Higginson, they represent these two fundamental sides of the American soul, the impulse toward isolation and the impulse toward intervention, the urge to retreat to the cabin in the woods and the urge to break down the courthouse door.
And here's the provocative thought I want to leave everyone with. We usually define action as what Higginson did, leading troops, storming courthouses, fighting political battles. He was a man of action.
Without a doubt.
But Dickinson never left her house. For the last decades of her life, she stayed in her room.
Yet her words, the simpler news that nature told, have outlasted every single one of his physical battles. His books are mostly out of print. Her poems are taught in every classroom in the world.
So my question is this. Did the recluse ultimately perform the more enduring, the more powerful act of intervention? Did she change the world more by staying home than he did by going out into it?
It really makes you question what power really looks like. Is it force? Or is it insight? Is it loud? Or is it quiet?
That is something to chew on.
Indeed it is.
To everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into white heat. We really hope this makes you look for your own preceptors in some unlikely places.
And maybe to value the crack in the armor, that little break in the polish where conscience and genius can finally get in.
Exactly. Until next time, keep reading and keep questioning.
Take care.